Hey guys, it's Scott with Scottie B Cards, and in this video I want to talk about the top grading companies in the hobby right now and rank them from worst to best. I want to look at all the grading companies right now in this moment, what the hobby's opinion is, the pros, the cons, and even what type of cards you should send to what grading company. 6 months ago, I actually made, maybe even a year ago, I made a video on this exact topic, and it's amazing how much has changed in that year in regards to the hobby's opinions and the value of certain companies' graded cards. It's pretty crazy. So the first thing I want to say, you'll see in each grading company, you'll see the Mike Trout 2011 Topps Update rookie card, just so it's consistent. You'll see the CSG is the old label, and I'll get to that when I get to CSG. So the first thing is honorable mentions. These are all grading companies that are around. FCG is growing quite rapidly right now in comparison to anybody else who's new or in the honorable mentions section. I've spoken to the owner of FCG. He was really nice. I don't have any opinion about their graded cards just because I've never graded with them. They do like the BGS black label, so it might be, maybe we'll look at it as a knockoff, but they look really nice. And then ISA has been around for a long time. GMA has been around for a long time. BCCG is not really around anymore, but you'll still see their cards graded and encapsulated, even though Beckett, who owned and did BCCG, does not do this anymore. They don't even worry about that. We also have Mint and KSA in Canada. I also never graded with them, obviously, just because I live in the States, and so I don't have any thoughts on them. So let's go to the number 5. This is HGA, hybrid grading approach. There's been some development over the last 6 months where people would argue they wouldn't even be in the top 5, and I get that, but HGA is still respected by a lot of people. They have a lot of fans, which is great. I one time made a video when they first came out back in February of 2021 and said, hey, I know HGA 95s are going for the same price as PSA 10s or more. I'd recommend not buying those until we see how it shakes out. And that was my argument. Just like, hey, let's just see what happens because PSA is the standard. People did not like that video, and that's fine. We all have our opinions. And I will say, me personally, I'm glad I did not buy HGA graded cards. But overall, just because they've trended downwards, let's talk about their pros and cons. Their pros, they're very customizable. So you'll see this slab, it's a different color that matches the card very well, while PSA or BGS or SGC, they might clash with the card. PSA's red looks bad with green in people's eyes. The red looks bad with certain other colors. And because of that, people prefer something like HGA. And HGA, I didn't put this in the pros section, but they also have horizontal slabs. So if the card is a landscape card, kind of like the Juan Soto hands on hip image variation rookie from Topps Update, that would be sideways and the label would be sideways, so it looks aesthetically pleasing essentially. AI has been introduced. I don't know how strong their AI really is. People have said it's basically not even like really machine learning. It's more of just like help with centering and authenticity. It could be more than that. That's just what I've heard from others. They have the color match like I discussed with the labels. They have a very sturdy case. I did have one in my hands a few times and they felt really good and they looked really good in hand. The cons, the first one's the color match. And the reason for that is because if you had a bunch of HGA graded cards and they're all different colors, they might not look as good as, a PSA registry set where everything is the same color and the flip looks the same, which is a pro for some people. The next con is Armstrong International. They have just taken over HGA. It was founded by a fellow hobbyist and he had a great vision and great dream, but now Armstrong International is the primary owner and who takes care of HGA. I know nothing about Armstrong International. I don't think anyone in the hobby does yet. We will find out more over the coming days, but regardless, that is a con because we don't know what the future is of HGA. That might be a pro as well because they might have some more funding behind them, but we'll see what happens. They have major scaling issues. Right now, we've seen that they basically have a huge backlog because they've been able to scale. They have limited acceptance of submissions. This is very interesting because these submissions, they basically limited them so they could not have a backlog. Now they have a backlog, which is frustrating. 8.5 subgrades have been on 9.5 graded cards, which is strange because that's a pretty low subgrade. BGS has that same situation on the surface when everything else is a 10 and 8.5 is the surface grade. They'll give it a 9.5, but for HGA, it's been relatively random. And lastly, because it is a new grading company, because all the other reasons I mentioned before, people may not want these slabs long term, which sucks if you're spending money to get them graded by HGA. Let's talk about CSG. You'll see their new slab over here. It looks so nice compared to what their old one looked like. But regardless, the pros, they are huge in their industries in currency and coins and paper money. They're very reputable. On top of that, comic books, TCG like Pokemon and Magic the Gathering. They also grade cards now for a while. And because of that, they already have that reliability factor that other grading companies have to earn, like HGA, even FCG from the beginning. They have to really earn that. Another pro is they can scale scale easily. They already have the facility most likely, and they already have the payroll to have people on there to work for them, and that no grading because they grade other types of cards. That's a really big deal that they can just scale. They can hire. They can do things that other grading companies can't. They have the eBay authentication deal. This is if a card is worth a certain dollar amount. If you buy it on eBay, they send it to CSG. They authenticate that it's a real card. They don't grade it, and they send it to the actual person who purchased the card. This is good because CSG is getting a lot more exposure that they would not have gotten before. And on top of that, this paves the way. I don't know if this is going to happen, but CSG could become the exclusive grader for eBay. And if that does happen, that's a really big deal for CSG because that's a lot of cards purchased on eBay and you can get it graded instantly, which people would like. They have really clear cases, which look extremely nice. Even with the old flip that people didn't like, the cases look fantastic, and that's something that people really like about them for those that collect CSG graded cards. And they have a new slab. As you can see, this Tom Brady. They made this little flip smaller than this flip, the black versus the green. Black goes better with a lot of cards versus where green might clash. And on top of that, the actual grading scale is different. A CSG 9.5 was considered gem mint like BGS's 9.5 was, and even HGA's 9.5 was, while PSA and SGC had their 10 grade as their gem mint. But now CSG has aligned themselves more with SGC and PSA, where a 10 is a gem mint. If you have a CSG 9.5, send it to CSG and they'll give you a 10 gem mint card versus the 9.5 gem mint card, because in their eyes they're the same grade. It's just now they have the more traditional grading standards because that's what the hobby likes. They have very strict grading, which can be a pro because you're getting a very highly graded card. There are some things where you'll have a crack a CSG 10 and get a PSA 3. It's just all different people's opinions, and maybe somebody missed a flaw that the other person might have caught, or it got damaged while it was getting cracked out, things like that. The cons, they grade strictly, and because of that, it's not easy to get a 10 like other people claim PSA is. That it can be a con because their gem rate is lower in comparison to their fellow grading companies. They have ugly slabs in circulation with the green slabs, and there's some people that don't like these current ones as well, which can be a detriment for someone wanting to purchase a CSG graded card. They're not as favorable yet in the collector's eyes, but that could change. We've seen so much change in this grading landscape, as I'll discuss later in this video, even with HGA, that it's not an impossible situation. This is one of the premier grading companies here soon. Their flips up here, these actual paper in the case, are big still in comparison to other grading companies. The cases do scuff very easily, which is a con because people want their cases to be clear and without any issues. That's like the consequence of having them be so clear, I'm assuming. So they do scuff easier than other grading companies. The cards do not go for as much yet as the top grading companies. This new grading scale will definitely help that. Now let's talk about number 2B. You'll see I skipped 3 and went straight to 2B and 2A because of the ground SGC has made up on BGS over the last 12 months. On top of that, even PSA. When I made this video last time, people were really mad at SGC for a pretty good reason, because they claimed they could keep up with the backlog, and then all of a sudden they have a huge backlog and people haven't gotten their cards back forever. They claim they can stay with the big boys, and then they didn't, and now they're kind of in that group as a big grading company, which is exciting for SGC and for you and I, because there's another grading option that's cheap and quick. Let's discuss the pros. They're great for vintage. PSA and SGC are relatively close to being the same in vintage cards. Obviously, if it's like a PSA 9 versus an SGC 9, the PSA 9 might get more, but the point remains it's extremely close when it comes to value. And if it comes to BVG, which is Beckett's grading company for vintage, it doesn't have that value. They have a chance at a gold label 10. So PSA has a PSA 10 and that's it. And then SGC has a pristine gold label 10, which is a step above a PSA 10, which goes for significantly more than a PSA 10. The cases present very well. The flips, these up here, have really grown on me. I used to not like them at all. And the cases are thick and sturdy, and they present pretty well. They have had a huge growth over the last 12 months, which I've already kind of hit on. Because of that, people are very fond of SGC. They have the best turnaround times in the hobby right now for the price. It's not very expensive, and you get your cards back. I go through Nash Cards on Instagram if you want to look them up. It's $23 a card, and you get it back within, a month at most. Probably around 10 to 20 business days, honestly. They have a very low cost for grading, like I hit on. You can do a SGC 5-day for only $50 through Nash Cards again, where other grading companies, they cannot guarantee anything similar to that when it comes to turnaround times. They're very transparent. That's one thing they do well, is they're willing to tell everybody their situation at the grading company. If they need to raise prices, they will let you know through a very nice way. They'll give you a video. They'll explain their thought process. They've shown through SportsCard Investor their entire facility, what it looks like on the inside, and how they grade cards. They're just very transparent compared to like BGS, for example, who you don't know anything about what's going on at BGS. They give an autograph grade on cards with good autographs for no cost. Say this was autographed, it was a bold Mike Trout auto, they would give it a 10 autograph grade. If it's below a 10, they don't grade it, and it's no additional cost. Their grading scale is good because they have a 10 pristine, a 10 gem mint, 9.5 mint plus, and a 9 mint. While with PSA you have a 9 mint, and a 10 gem mint, which in some cases you can see how some cards are actually better conditioned than others. There's some gem mints that could on any other day been a 9, and there's some 9s that any other day could have been a gem mint. I know that's the argument for any grading company, but that's why the 9.5 is nice, and that's why the pristine is nice. The cons, they have low value on modern compared to PSA, even SGC 10s versus PSA 10s. It's just not there yet, and that's why people don't send to them. And a 9.5 compared to a 10 at PSA isn't close at all yet. Their slabs are not very popular yet. That's a subjective statement because they're very unique. It has the black presentation. It has a different looking slab, while PSA is the clear and the red. It's just what the hobbies really liked so far, but this is changing currently. They have no subgrades, which is that a bad thing? You know, I put a question mark because they've said that maybe they would, but recently Peter, who is in charge of SGC in some capacity, he said he's not going to have subgrades on the cards. Their slabs are rather bulky because they are thick. You can see the actual border from the trout is really thick and top to bottom is still thick, and that's something people don't like, while PSA and BGS are thinner. They're not thinner in this direction, they're thinner in this direction because BGS has very thick slabs in that way. They do not authenticate autographs that aren't factory pulled. They don't actually authenticate, yeah, Mike Trout signed this at a spring training game, so we'll say it's authentic. They used to, but now they do not, which can be a con for some people because I have a Ronald Acuna autograph that I got from him that I want to get authenticated, but I can't because of SGC not being able to do that. The thick cards do move in the case when you move it. When you shake it, you can hear it rattling around, which I don't love. I have no idea if that hurts the actual edges and corners of the card. So that brings us to the point. What kind of cards should you grade with SGC? You want cards with slight surface flaws. I've noticed cards with print lines, like the actual roller lines, can get 10s, and even cards with slight little scratches can get 9.5s and sometimes 10s on a good day if you're lucky. So slight surface flaws, they get hit hard by PSA, but SGC is able to look over those in some way because the card still presents well in the case. And that's where the cards with roller and print lines comes into play again. And do not send off-center cards to SGC because they will dock it and it will really suck. So just make sure you don't do that. I've had multiple cards that looked great, and then I didn't realize because I don't have borders that it was off-center, and then you get it back as an 8.5, and you're like, why is this an 8.5? It's because it's off-center. Now let's talk about 2A, which is BGS. Just like I said with SGC, you have the opportunity to get a higher grade than their Gem Mint, which is a 9.5. And because the BGS 10 goes for significantly more than PSA and SGC, it's a really good risk. I think it's like a 3 to 5% chance of getting it, but if you can get it, it goes for significantly more than you would have gotten at the other grading companies. Very small chance, but that is a pro. On top of that, the thick cases with the inner sleeve for protection makes the card not move around, and it gives some sense of security. If I had to pick any of these grading companies for actual protection of the card, I would go with BGS hands down every single time. That's a personal preference, but they do feel like the card is safe and secure. They're very good for thick cards. They grade easier on thick cards. And that's just because they don't hit the corners and edges as much. You know, you could have an 8 edge and everything else is these subgrades, for example, and the card could get a 8.5. If you had an 8 edge at PSA, it'd be an 8, essentially. That's just kind of how it works. For thick cards, they are very good because the cases can be thicker the way that BGS does it, which makes them a very good option for RPAs, for example. They have subgrades and transparency. Some people say this is a good and a bad thing. It's kind of quantifying the entire grade of the card in only 4 categories, and there could be more like SGC claims, but overall you kind of have an idea why the card graded the way that it did, which people really enjoy because it makes it easier to know what you're getting in that card. They're great at protecting your cards, like I pointed out up here, for actual protection. That's good because if you just want a card for your PC and you want to have it in your collection that moves around quite a bit, the card is safe and protected. I even did a video where I torture tested them, and the BGS card by far did the best. They're popular flips, and that's subjective because I enjoy this gold pristine and gold gem mint flip. I think it looks really good. It's not too wide, it's straightforward, and it actually has this serial number. You can look it up on their website, see what day it was graded, and so forth. Their grading scale is good because you do have the BGS 9.5 Gem Mint, you have stuff above the Gem Mint, and you have stuff below the Gem Mint. While PSA again is Mint or Gem Mint, that gives us more option. It gives us more transparency about why the card is graded the way that it is. The cons: their Gem Mint card, which is a 9.5, is worth less than the PSA Gem Mint card, which is a 10. Same with SGC and probably going to be with CSG as well. That's just because people like the 10, and I don't blame them. I like the 10. I think 10 is a great number. Who doesn't want a 10 out of 10? But the point remains, the 9.5 is viewed by BGS the same as a PSA 10. Whether the hobby views it that way, it's different, but that's how it's viewed, and they sell for significantly less. They have a very confusing scale for beginners because of everything I said. There's the Gem Mint, there's the Pristine 10, and there's the Black Label Perfect 10 with all these subgrades being a 10. All these things are really confusing, which again, PSA is very attractive because it's a 10 or it's not. And so there's an argument from both sides. They have inconsistent slabs. And what I mean by that, this font sometimes is different. It's darker, it's lighter, it's thicker, it's thinner. On top of that, sometimes they're spaced differently. The actual autograph token, so if it's a 10 autograph, it's a separate token over here. In the past, they're cut differently from each other. They move around. It's all random. And because of that, the next point is they have fake slabs on the market. It's not as prevalent anymore, so maybe they got a handle on it. But because of the differences on the slabs, you have to look at certain little things to see if it's real or if it's fake. And it's just kind of hard to know what you're looking at. And so because of the consistency factor, PSA and even SGC offer a little bit better consistency, which people do like. The slabs aren't as clear as other grading companies because, again, they have that inner sleeve, and that makes it a little bit cloudier and a little bit not as clear. They have poor communication, probably one of the worst in the entire hobby, to the actual fans of the grading company. I'm a big BGS fan, and even for me, it's like, well, I'm going to send to SGC because I don't know when they're going to be able to get to their backlog. And I really enjoyed SGC. So the poor communication's tough. What kind of card should you grade with BGS? Cards with minor corner dings. I've seen a lot of cards with minor corner dings get a 9 corners grade, everything else a 9.5, and it gets a gem mint. Corners are tough for PSA because if the corner's bad and it's visible, you're not going to get a gem mint 10 no matter what happens. Cards with minor surface flaws. Again, similar to SGC, if there's minor roller lines, then I think you send to BGS. They might give you 9 or 9.5 subgrade. Anything with scratches, not as much, but the minor print lines, not a big deal. Thick cards, amazing for BGS, like I said. Let's talk about number 1, PSA, Professional Sports Authentication. They are the premier grading company by far. Let's go through the pros. They sell the best. They have a simple and consistent label, as you can see up here, and it's the same on every single type of these graded cards. They have an easy to understand scale, 1 to 10. They have an 8.5, for example, between 8 and 9. They don't use it very often. It's actually hardly ever used at all. But regardless, it's really straightforward. It's a gem mint grade, a 10, or it's not, which people like. Great for modern and vintage. That's the pro of PSA. You can send your cards here, and no matter what type of card it is, it will contain value. Their registry is awesome, where you actually can see how much of a set you have, and on top of that, you can compare sets across other collectors and see whose set's the best. They have very clear slabs as well. They do get minor scratching because of this, but there's no inner sleeve, which makes the card not as protected, but on top of that, you can see the card better, unlike BGS, and they're by far the most loved in the hobby. They're doing a good job of scaling. I know right now our cards, I still have an order from 14 months ago at PSA right now, but I hope it gets back soon. But they've been hiring like crazy, and they're getting back and trying to get back to where they can be the number 1 at no matter what time. You can get them back quickly, and they'll never be behind with a backlog. Cons, cards can get damaged. I've had a lot of very similar Mike Trout cards like this one get damaged on the edges and corners from banging around and shipping, and if you drop them. It's tough because these thinner cards do rattle around, and when that happens, they're getting micro damage all along the edges. That's my personal experience. So I've had it happen to me. I've seen other people online have the same problem. They're not great for thick cards. They're really thick in comparison to being the standardized thin slab, which people don't really like. And on top of that, they grade thick cards extremely tough, which people don't love either. They have long turnaround times currently. This is actually being worked on right now. Their current turnaround times for anything you send in now actually gets back quicker than they state, but anything you sent in bulk a long time ago in the value section, you're not seeing it for a while, and that's just kind of how it is, but they're working on it. That's the backlog again, which is their current con in comparison to SGC. To actually get a card graded by PSA right now, they're the most expensive, which is tough. I think over time, as they do scale, because of the number 1 option, that will get better, but overall right now, there's a lot of cards I would grade that I'm not because they're expensive to get them graded, and it's just not worth it yet. Their dual service for the autograph and the grade of the card costs more and takes longer than other grading companies, while SGC will just throw it on for free. BGS does it for, I think, a couple dollars more, and it doesn't take any longer. Some 10s aren't 10s, some 9s aren't 9s. The grading scale argument that their grading scale isn't perfect, and on any given day, it could go up or down. What kind of card should you grade with PSA? Off-center cards. A 60 to 40 centering can 10, while other grading companies like BGS, if you have 60-40 centering, it probably will get a 9. Same with SGC. They're extremely hard on it. So anything that's slightly off-center, anything that's relatively off-center can still get a 9 at PSA. Minor back corner dings. I've seen on the back of cards that have little tiny dings, they still can get a 10, which is interesting. And surface dimples. They have not, for me at least, hit me for surface dimples as long as they're relatively minor. I've gotten 10 on those as well. Let's look at the top 3 grading company rankings. You can kind of see, I won't go over this for very long because the video is getting long, but regardless, there's PSA, they have a lot of green, SGC has a lot of green, and BGS has a little bit of green just in protection. But other than that, you can kind of get an idea of why these companies are ranked the way that they are. And this is all in my opinion, so it could be relatively biased, but this is all like why I think SGC could make ground in other grading companies. And now let's look at value. So here's value over the last 6 months. You can see the BGS 10, this is the top line. They're all the Mike Trout card. It's kind of trending downwards. The SGC 10 is actually valued more right now. The last sold was $2,100 versus the BGS 9.5, which is viewed as the same grade at $1,580, while the PSA 10 is still king at $2,650, and then you have the BGS 10, which is at $5,000. You can see that BGS 9.5 and the SGC 10 are actually trending upwards. The BGS 9.5 has made the most increase over the last 6 months. That's because people are realizing they're still a good company and they grade relatively fairly in comparison to other grading companies. SGC is still gaining popularity, up 4%. PSA 10 is declining. That's just because they're really hyped 6 months ago. And the most interesting thing is actually that the BGS 10 is declining over the last 6 months. While the 9.5 is up 17%, the BGS 10 is down 23%, which is kind of surprising. But maybe that's just because people are realizing that a gem mint versus a pristine is only maybe one subgrade difference. So it's kind of crazy to pay extra for that. So overall, that is my rankings and my reviews of all the grading companies. Let me know in the comments below if you agree, disagree, what your thoughts are. And other than that, I'll catch you in the next video.